Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Pinelands Speaker Series. We got a beautiful, nice spring day today. And with us is Joe Martucci with the Atlantic City Press. He's a meteorologist with the press, and he's going to talk to you all about weather in the Pinelands today. And with that, I'm going to turn the program over to Joe.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me here. Appreciate being with all of you here. I know it's a nice sunny day, and we'll make sure we get through this in a nice and timely fashion so we can enjoy this beautiful weather that we have here. But we do have some concerns, right? We are in the Pinelands. Wildfire concern is always something at the top of my mind this time of year. So, every time I see these nice, beautiful days during March, April, and May, I'm always cognizant of, hey, it's nice as long as we make sure we limit our ping and we don't have wildfires. But again, great to be with you here. Unfortunately, I know we couldn't all be together last year at the speaker series, or I couldn't be with you at the speaker series, but looking forward to this this morning. So let's start talking about the Pinelands here. It is a unique place in New Jersey. We all know that. That's nothing new that I'm saying. But there's a couple of different weather factors that I like to point out to that make it unique. One is called radiational cooling, forest fires, of course, and flash flooding. And those are three different things that I'll touch upon as we go forward over the next hour here. Actually, I think I have this showing up too much, or a little too early here, but let me get to the image here. So what I want to show you on the left is that's where the Pinelands are, of course, everywhere that's highlighted and outlined in that orange area. But look at this satellite picture here on February 20th of this year. We had snow, believe it or not. After last winter, where we saw just a trace of snow in Hammonton, we had accumulating snow in the Pinelands. And if you look at that satellite map, you would say everywhere except for the Pine Barrens. It's actually the forest so dense that it's the
Hey,
only
Joe, I
place
need to break in for a second.
Yeah.
The screen share isn't up, so we're just seeing you. We're not seeing your screen.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry about that, Joel. And sorry
No
about
problem.
that, everybody. Let me see if I can. Give me 1 second. I apologize.
Sure. Yep.
Does that work, Joel?
Yep, it's working now.
It works. You just don't maybe see like the raw PowerPoint. Let me start from the beginning again. All right, so I'll go forward. So I'll kind of start back and sorry about that again.
Okay,
Wait,
here
Joel,
we go.
Are we seeing? What are we seeing? Just the PowerPoint, but not like the full presentation? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
just I guess hit start from beginning and you should be okay. There you go.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'll start back over here and we'll just go through this quickly. So a couple of different factors. The Pinelands, you need radiational cooling, forest fires, as well as flash flooding or the lack thereof. What you're seeing in front of me here on that kind of front image is actually a radar that is showing a forest fire. And we can see those many times this time of the year. So what I wanted to show you, and this is where I was at before, February 20th, we had snow here in South Jersey and all of New Jersey, but you wouldn't know it if you looked at the Pinelands because it just shows up green and that whole bunch of white. And that's just because the forest is so darn dense, it covers the snow cover on the ground on satellite. So just a little something unique that we have here in the Pinelands. And you see the arrow pointing over there. So here's what we'll cover over the next hour. We'll talk about the geography of the Pinelands, the climatology of the Pinelands, the wildfire threat in the Pinelands and what factors go into that, climate change in the Pinelands, and then I'll be happy to take everyone's questions here Thursday morning. So we'll start off a little bit about myself. As Joel said, a meteorologist for the Press of Atlantic City. I am a Jersey guy through and through. Got my degree in Rutgers University. I've only worked in New Jersey before I was here at the Press. I worked in consulting, meteorology in the northwest corner of the state. I do radio for Longport Media, so you might hear me there. Originally, I was born somewhere where not only were there no Pinelands, but there were no farms in my county either. I grew up in Union, New Jersey, in Union County, dense suburbia with some cities. So, the Pinelands was really just one of those places I learned about in school. When I heard the Pine Barrens, I used to think of gray and desolate places and when I was 7 or 8 years old. But I have really come to enjoy my time here, working with you, forecasting for you here in the Pinelands, talking about the Pinelands. In fact, I was just out in the past couple of weeks, one over in Batstow with a professor from Stockton talking about the pollen forecast for the spring ahead. Give you a hint, if you're allergic to tree and mold pollen, not going to be the best season for you here. Looks to be high on those two accounts. And then I was also out just last week out in the forest here with Bob Williams of Pine Forestry, looking at what was going on there in the forest health. But, you ask people how long you've wanted to be a meteorologist for. And if you ask 10 of them, I would say 7 out of 10 said they wanted to do it since before high school. And honestly, that number is probably low. It's something that you kind of just get bitten by, and then you want to be a meteorologist your whole life. So it was a lifelong interest in weather for me. I will say I'm maybe a little unique compared to other meteorologists in the sense that usually it's some kind of big weather event. If you're talking about people my age, I'm 29 years old, knocking on 30 in just 5 weeks away. But when you're talking about people my age, it's usually the blizzard of '96 or President's Day storm in 2003. For me, it was just something lifelong. One of the first things I can ever remember in my life actually was being in my grandma's basement in Clark, New Jersey, also in Union County. And Al Roker, who's now on the Today Show, but at the time he was working for local NBC, was on television. I remember my aunt telling me, like, "Hey, Joe, that's going to be you when you get older. It's going to be you." And I remember thinking to myself at that age, 4, 3, maybe 5 years old, yeah, I do want to do that. So I must have known I liked it since before that. A lot of my life revolved watching the Weather Channel. You had the local on the 8s, you had the tropical update at the 50s past the hour. I used to make my own hurricane maps. I used to pretend these storms were getting massive and they were going right into New Jersey. Of course, we don't want that in real life, but it's just something that you're just kind of ingrained with. It's just your life. The first website I ever went on was weather.com when I was about 8 years old. So we're talking about maybe 1998, maybe it was a little younger, 98 or 98 or 99. And can't do it without they say it takes a village, and that would be true. My parents were always there supporting me. When I was younger, it was buying books about the weather, taking me to the library about the weather, and even older, maybe driving me to see a meteorologist give a talk. I remember vividly when I was probably maybe even a freshman in college. Went with my parents down here to Atlantic City. They stayed in Atlantic City, did their thing, and I was here for the Emergency Management Association, the EMA conference in Atlantic City, and got to a couple of people who worked for the time at the Weather Channel. So have to give a shout out to them. In terms of what we do at the press, if you are in our coverage area, I understand some of you not be, some of you, maybe. It's comprehensive. We are pushing the limits of what you would consider a traditional broadcast meteorologist. The short answer is my day is something that you would like to see, someone you would see on television. I just live on the internet and your news. So videos are the cornerstone of what I do here. We do daily forecasts twice a day, also doing environmental pieces. Like I said, just did one on allergy forecast here in South Jersey. So, we do videos on that. Writing, same thing, daily weather column, not only in your newspaper, on our website as well, other environmental stories. Story I'm working on now, not even related to the forecast, is about the NJDP and proposed regulations for sea level rise, and what that means and why they came to the numbers that they did and what local towns have to say about it. Host a podcast, and maybe Joel, maybe we should get you on the podcast here as we go forward into the spring season. It's Something in the Air podcast, would like to say, was a New Jersey Press Association award winner. Comes out the first and third Wednesdays. First Wednesday of the month, we're always recapping the month of weather with my birthday buddy, my meteorological father, and the New Jersey State Climatologist, Dr. Dave Robinson. Some of you may be familiar with him. Third Wednesday of the month, we usually bring out another guest. And in fact, later today, I'm recording for next Wednesday's episode, and we're talking about weather hair. So I'm having the guy who cuts my hair. We're going to talk all about curly hair, frizzy hair, humid hair, all that stuff. Social media is a very active part of the job. It helps to interact with everybody here, and would love to interact with you. if you're on a platform, I'm there. So anything from Facebook to Instagram to TikTok to Twitter, I'm on there. Our website's down there below. And sorry, I messed that up. And then community engagement, doing things like this, part of the Ventnor local emergency planning committee, part of the Smithville 4th of July parade committee, just being out in the community. I love talking with people. Obviously, the past year has been really limiting us in the amount of personal interaction. Otherwise, I'd see you all in person. But doing this over Zoom has been just as wonderful as well. So just to give you an idea of our coverage area, it is Atlantic, Cape May, Cumberland, and Ocean, Southern Ocean. So Pinelands are a big part of what I think of when I think of weather, when I think of climate, when I think of the environment. I was just on the phone with a weather reporter, not a meteorologist, but a weather reporter in the area, and was just kind of saying, when I talk, wildfires are big here, coastal flooding is big here, farming is big here, and those are the pieces that we've seen great numbers on, and I know you enjoy it. And that might not be the same, for other parts of the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. So let's talk about Pinelands geography. So anywhere shaded in that red is the Pinelands area. And just to give you an idea of what the highest elevation is, we're talking about 205 feet, Apple Pie Hill, just to give you an idea. Most of Northwest New Jersey is 4 times that elevation. So relatively low lying, but we do have some hills in the region. We have the Forked River Mountains, 187 feet tall. Many areas once you get closer to the coast. So you're talking about getting over to Stafford Township, right along the coast of the Delaware Bay, near sea level. And that plays a role because we have the Kirkwood Cohansey aquifer system. Obviously, we don't want to take too much out of the aquifer system. That's not good. But we also have rising sea levels. And some of those areas in Cumberland, in Morris River Township, in Dennis, in Upper, in Woodbine, are turning a little brackish. When I was out with Pine Creek Forestry last week, that was something that they noted to me. Hey, some of these forests down here in southern Cumberland and northwestern Cape May County, are seeing more brackish water. So that is something to do with the pinelands. We get tremendous benefit from the pinelands. We all know this. The amount of runoff avoided by trees, millions of gallons per year. If you look at this, we're in that dark green over there. So we do a great job. That's 160 million gallons of water per year avoided from runoff. So, what is runoff? Well, you get the rain that falls, and, it goes into your roads, or it goes into your sidewalks, and then it drains somewhere. That's runoff. It's not absorbed by the soil here. So, we do a very good job with that. Pinelands is so special that we have our own climate zone here in New Jersey. While there are different ways of doing climate zones, we have to break it down even more in New Jersey just because of how different the Pinelands are and other parts of South Jersey and getting up into the central northern part of the state. So this is from David Ludlam's book. He was a former New Jersey state climatologist before my birthday, Dave Robinson, May 13th birthdays, if you want to give us a happy birthday wish. Just kidding. But 80% of the Pinelands National Reserve is in the Pine Barrens, 20% of it's in the coastal areas. So, when you talk about the Pinelands, you can't just talk about inland areas. You have to talk about what, I would consider the shore as well. And that matters because we have different climates between the coastal areas and the Pinelands right on this map. And I'll show you those differences in just a little bit. You can't talk about climate and you can't talk about weather without talking about this map here, the plant hardiness zone. And what is the average lowest temperature that we see a year here? It's the standard at which plants will thrive. Now, for most of the pines, we're in that 6B zone. That means our average annual lowest temperatures, -5 to 0. In those places that are in that darker green, so that would be like Mullica Township, Vineland, Buna, Washington Township, -10 to -5. These are changing with time, and we have seen that with climate change. We did not have a night this winter that got below 0 anywhere in South Jersey. We did not have a night last winter that had a night below 0 anywhere, or at least anywhere that we have a recording station. But we do have good data from many places in the Pinelands. Indian Mills, one of them, Hammonton being another. And, maybe it's not something you think about right away, but Atlantic City International Airport, which is a tremendous help with our weather and climate data, also in the Pinelands. That's where we get the most accurate and the most high quality snowfall data, rain data, temperature data, winds, and etc. So what do we grow in 6A or 6B? Well, I think we all know this. Corn, eggplant, and of course, the Jersey tomato. And those thrive in 6A or 6B zone here. Let's take a look at what we see in Hammonton across the area. That red line is the maximum mean temperature throughout the year. That blue line is the average low. That brown line is pretty much the average of the average high and the average low. So let's take a look at 32 and 80. I think those are some numbers that we can all relate to. 32, of course, the freezing point. 80 is, when it starts to become hot out. 32 degrees. We're below 32 from about, on average, the middle part of November, right until about the, we'll say, middle part of March. So your snow season's around that time as well. 80 degrees, summertime. When does that start? Well, as soon as you get into July and August, of course, the later part of June, and then most of September has an average high of 80 degrees. It's snow. If you're a snow lover, we did pretty good this year. We had 13.4 this winter. We averaged 18.1. If you're a snow hater, well, you really, 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 really like 2 winters ago. We only had a trace in 2019 and 2020 here. Most of our snows in February. And, I think people might usually think it's January, and I would too upon first thought, but actually February usually has the most snow because that's when we can get our biggest, snowiest nor'easters. We get a little more moisture in the air in February than January, just because temperatures on average are a little bit warmer. The more moisture you have, the warmer the air is, the more moisture you can have. So that plays into account here. So let's compare what we would see from Hammonton to other places in South Jersey. We're looking at Cape May. The biggest differences are in that frost-free days, 183 on average in Hammonton. A little more humid than Cape May. That might seem a little counterintuitive. You might think by the shore, we would actually be a little bit less, or excuse me, away from the shore, it'd be a little bit less humid. But one thing to consider is at night, we have something called radiational cooling. I talked about this in the beginning. Radiational cooling is when the heat from the day can escape straight into outer space with nothing blocking it. No clouds, no winds. We are often less windy in Hammonton than we are at the shore, less windy in the Pine Barrens than we are right along the coast. With less mixing, we can actually cool down closer to the dew point, which is a moisture in the air. The closer your temperature and your dew point are to each other, the higher the humidity. So that is something to do with that. Overall, we have that diurnal range. It gets colder in the morning than it does at the shore, and it gets hotter during the day than it does at the shore on most days. And you can kind of see that in your January and July average temperatures. A little bit wetter too than Cape May. For those of you who are watching this in Cape May County, you know about the Cape May bubble. The folklore that Cape May County is just shielded from all bad weather, shielded from the snow, shielded from the thunderstorms, shielded from the extreme heat. It's been something that in my time here, I love to hear about from the locals, and I've done a couple of pieces on it as well. And there is actually some hard scientific proof that Cape May County is a little bit different than the rest of South Jersey here. But let's compare it to some other places. This is Central Jersey. This is Trenton. Notice that the frost-free days are still lower in Hammonton than in Trenton, even though we're further south. And that has to do with the sugar soil of the Pine Barrens. And we're going to talk about that at the end. But really, we do get colder nights than even we do further north. And this is the northern part of the state. This is Sussex, New Jersey. We're not going to have as short of a growing season as them, but we're probably closer to them than a lot of other places in the Garden State. So this is how we shape up between the Pinelands, again, Hammonton and Greene, with the rest of New Jersey. So, a little bit varied for such a small state. We are something like, don't quote me, but something like the 42nd largest state in the country, obviously the 8th most populated. But we do have these different climate zones right within our own state. And that has a lot to do with the Atlantic Ocean and something too to our south, the Delaware Bay. If we didn't have the Delaware Bay, New Jersey would probably act a little more in unison with each other, but the Delaware Bay does help create a little bit of a different climate in Cape May. If we didn't have that Delaware Bay, and it was just land to the west of us here in Cape May, pretty much what you would see in Cape May would be the same up and down the coast, a little bit different just because of the Delaware Bay here. So let's talk about wildfires. We had, unfortunately, a 190-acre wildfire in Lakewood earlier this year. 99% of wildfires are human-induced, and that was the case in this one in Lakewood. So, we always want to make sure we're limiting our burning. We're fully extinguishing all flames, especially during March, April, and May. Why those months? Well, we don't have a lot of humidity in the air just yet. The Gulf of Mexico is at its quote-unquote coldest. I would still hop in the Gulf of Mexico in March, but they're at its coldest temperatures, and that's where we get a lot of our moisture from. So you have the lower humidity, and then to also get wildfire spread, we need gusty winds and dry fine fuels. The fine fuels are your grasses and your underbrush, as well as really anything that's on the forest ground. Now, when you hear from the National Weather Service will say that there is either, quote, an enhanced risk for wildfire spread today, or there's a critical risk for wildfire spread today. And I want to just point out what the differences are and what they mean. Critical is a stronger word than enhanced, but here's the formula that goes into it. So I have the enhanced risk here, and then let's flip on over to the critical risk. So just to clarify again, we'll go from enhanced risk here, and then we'll make our way over to critical risk. And it's very important to know that it could rain in the morning in the Pine Barrens, and by the afternoon, we're talking about fire danger again. Case in point would be yesterday. Yesterday morning, we had a couple of rain showers that passed through. Someplace, Dennis Township picked up 0.14, so 0.14 of an inch. Other places saw a couple hundredths of an inch. Not a lot, but what happened? Sun came back out. Temperatures got up to around 70. Our 10-hour fuel moisture was 2 at Fort Dix. That is very, 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 very low. The lowest you can get is 0. So 2 is very low. So when you talk to anyone at a forest fire, to tell you the same thing. It could rain in the morning, but if it's windy and sunny for the afternoon, wildfire spread is real here. And again, most of them are unfortunately caused by us and are human induced here. So you need low humidity, gusty wind, and dry fine fuels. You look at the differences in the humidity. 20 to 40% is kind of what we saw yesterday afternoon, just to give you an idea. Under 20 was what many of you saw in the Pine Barrens on Monday and Tuesday. And, Monday and Tuesday just reminded me of like being in Vegas. I was actually in Death Valley, California in 2016. And it just like the sweat would just like peel off of you. Like you wouldn't even really be dripping in sweat. Your shirt was dry. It was just so dry. And you just needed to like drink water all day long. So that was the kind of humidity that we're talking about to really get that critical risk of wildfire spread. And yes, we do get that kind of desert like dry air a couple of days through the year here. I'm just going to take a drink of water. Speaking of, just bear with me 1 second. So why the wildfire? So the obvious reasons and the not so obvious reasons. Let's talk about the obvious. Plenty of forest around, many people in the forest. Because why? Well, we have Philadelphia and New York City. New York City, the largest city in the world. Philadelphia is largest country, excuse me. Philadelphia, no slouch either. We have a lot of people who visit the Pine Barrens, and we have full towns in the Pine Barrens, like a Hammonton. That's a great example. So, we have a lot of people around. They might be camping. They might just be going about their daily lives. That is a concern for wildfires. But here's maybe some of the not so obvious. The sugar soil, that sandy soil of the Pine Barrens has a role to play with it. That sand, just like sand at the beach, you drop a bucket of water and at the beach on the sand, it goes right through it. It dries up pretty quickly. Kind of the same thing. So our ground can dry out very quickly. We were just saying that before. It could rain in the morning, then by the afternoon, well, we're talking about forest fire concerns. It also gets hotter quicker in the Pine Barrens. There are days where Hammonton is 79 degrees and you can go up to, let's say, Freehold, New Jersey out of the Pine Barrens and it's 74. Not a big difference, still a comfortable day as long as the sun is out, but your humidity is probably going to be lower in the Pine Barrens because the further you get away from the dew point, so if the dew point, let's just say, is 32, well, 79 is up here, 74 is here, you're going to have a lower relative humidity in the Pine Barrens as a result. Taking a look at, this is called heat capacity. This is a great throwback to my time at Rutgers in thermodynamics class. And that involved a lot of equations, math equations that had no numbers in it. It was just all letters. I won't bore you with the details, but I will say that heat capacity is the amount of heat needed or energy needed to heat a given material. Where do we get our air from? The sun. So air is at a straight 1. That's where we set it at. Water is 4.2. So the more humid the air, the harder it is to heat up. Let me give you an example. Miami, Florida has never gotten over or at 100 degrees. It's never been at or over 100 degrees. Sounds pretty incredible considering that they're way further south than we are. They are in, Jim Fit, Kenny Chesney, good times, singing, drinking on the beach kind of territory. But they don't get that extreme heat when it comes to the air temperature. We, on the other hand, in South Jersey, our hottest day is 105 at Atlantic City International Airport. We have gotten over 100. You can expect a 100-degree day about once every other year. You have about a 50-50 shot each year about hitting 100 degrees. So that's because of the moisture. But let's talk about the Pine Barrens specifically compared it to other places in New Jersey. The sandy soil of the Pine Barrens needs less energy to heat up than your organic soils. So again, about sand on the beach. You're walking during the middle of the day. Let's say it's June. The sand's hot. It might be burning your feet as you're walking on the beach. I've been there before. What happens as soon as you get onto the boardwalk, or maybe they have one of those rubber mats, those blue rubber mats that they have to help you get your traction, it's cooler. Why is that? The sand has a lower heat capacity. It takes less energy to heat it up. So again, you can have days where Hammonton's 79, Freehold Township 74, Philadelphia 74. Those things do happen, and it's because of the heat capacity, and that in turn has to do with the wildfires. You get lower humidity in Pine Barrens during the day. At night is a different story, as we said before. At night, you get that radiation cooling, quick cooling in the Pine Barrens at night, and therefore you get higher humidities at night because your temperature is falling closer to the dew point than it is in Philadelphia, than it is along the shore, which might be a little bit milder during the night. Again, think about sand on the beach. I always like to come back to this because right as soon as that goes, pretty close to sunset here or is going down, the sand becomes pretty cool, actually, pretty quickly. I've had those days where I get on the beach at 1 o'clock and I stay until 6. And by 6 o'clock, I'm like, wow, the sand's actually like pretty cool right now. And when you got onto the beach at 1 o'clock, it was burning your feet. So same kind of concept here. We do have some benefits, of course, with the sandy soil. That is, we don't get as much flooding in the Pine Barrens, and that is great news. The wet spells don't drown out the soil as much. Actually, on a side note, what's good too is when you get severe weather, when you're talking about your severe thunderstorms that come through, the wind with the rain, that has made trees fall as they do in other parts. Because if you think about it, when your soil is wet or very soggy, kind of move that tree around a little bit easier. You can just again, I'm going to go back to the beach example. You can wobble that umbrella post in the sand easier if you have a lot of water that's saturating the soil. I'm going to back up. Not a great example, right? We're talking about the beach again. Let's talk about this. Let's say you had, you're in your backyard and you want to put an umbrella out in in your dirt or something like that. Well, if you just have the non-Pine Barren sandy soil, if you pour some water in it, it's actually going to move a little bit quicker if you're putting that umbrella in the ground than it would in the Pine Barrens. And with the trees and the way the root systems are, less trees fall with the severe weather. And it's home of the rare pygmy pitch pine, so that's another benefit too. We're in a unique area, not only in New Jersey but across the globe. When it comes to climate change here in the Pine Barrens, we are impacted just like the rest of the world. And there's positives and negatives, or at least there's the negatives that are perceived by us as humans. I tell people all the time, climate change isn't a religion. You don't believe in it or not. There are facts, and what you choose to do about those facts are where your beliefs come in. So, if you're telling me, hey, Joe, climate change is the biggest problem to humanity right now, we need to do everything we need to do to stop it. That is what you believe in. If you tell me, Joe, you know what? I don't think we're going to do anything to it. We're just going to see what happens and we'll adjust as necessary. That's your belief. I'm not going to tell you that. I'm a meteorologist. I'm not a policymaker. I'm not running for president. I'm not running for governor, not even for mayor. I am just your Preston Atlantic City meteorologist. These numbers, while it does say Atlantic City, just want to let you know this is really for Atlantic City International Airport, which is in the Pine Barrens in Pomona. This is from Climate Central, the same people who produced that graphic about the runoff earlier. The one thing that is stark that we have seen a dramatic number of record high temperatures compared to record low temperatures in recent decades. We were pretty 50-50 between hot records and cold records in the 40s and the 50s, even in the 1980s and the 1990s. We did have a cooler spell in the 60s and 70s, but as we've got into the 2000s and the 2010s, that difference is stark and is even more stark than the cold records versus the hot records back in the 1960s and 70s that you can see in the middle part of your chart here. Winter is our fastest warming season, and that's not just true for New Jersey. That's true for really anywhere east of the Rocky Mountains. It is the winter time, and really specifically the wintertime low temperatures that have been at a fast pace. The Earth has been warmer than it's been before. It has been colder than it's been right now. However, it's the rate of change at which this is occurring that has been unprecedented, barring an asteroid collision or some other mega impact to us, like a super volcano. We've risen almost 4 degrees since 1970. That being said, 1970 was a relatively cooler period, so this chart's a little exaggerated on the left, but the point stands that winter is our fastest warming season here. So what does that mean for us in the Pine Barrens? Well, I like to think about our farmlands here, and actually it's been a positive for our farmland. Some of you may be familiar with the man to the right here, and the image that just popped up, that's Gary Pavlis. From the Rutgers, New Jersey Experiment Station in Atlantic County. He's also the interim director for Cape May County right now. I had him on my podcast last month. You can look at the Wizard of Wine podcast on our website. He's responsible for much of the New Jersey wineries here, but is also working very closely with the blueberry plants and the grape plants as well. And here's what he told me. He said overall positive impact for them. And the reason is we have less of a winter kill with the same time of chilling hours. Put in other words, we're not getting those negative numbers as often anymore. We didn't see any negative numbers in South Jersey in the past 2 winters, but we're still getting the same amount of hours that these plants, specifically blueberry plants, require to be healthy as we go into the spring. So it's actually been a positive for us. The one thing that we're still getting that we haven't fully shaken off, even in a climate changing environment, are those late frost and freeze. Last year was a great example of that because we came off of one of the warmest December, January, February periods on record. March was above average. We had our last freeze at Atlantic City Marina. I believe it was in early March. That's way ahead of schedule. Even in the Pine Barrens and Atlantic City International Airport, we had our second to last freeze sometime in March. And then what happened? Just around May. In fact, on my birthday, on May 13th, not to keep talking about my birthday, but on May 13th, actually got down into below freezing for most of the Pine Barrens. So we had that late freeze here, even though we were doing, we'll say, so good during April and the month of March. So that is what climate change can do. We're also seeing a number of those frizzy, sultry, it just feels like soup when you walk outside days. These are the number of high humid heat days. This is a measure of how much overall moisture is in the atmosphere. When that number is higher, not only is it more moist, but we're privy to being hotter as well. New Jersey, our heat usually comes with a nice dose of humidity with it, and we have more than doubled that in recent time here. And this is between the 1980 to 1999 period to the 2000 and 2019 period. The only place where we did not get that increase as much is in the southeast, but they still increased as well. Just to give you a look at, where do we get this climate change from? These are our greenhouse gas emission sources. Over 50% come from the combination of transportation and electricity, and even industry and electricity on their own account for 50% here. We're going to wrap it up with just some general weather things that really you can apply to anywhere in the Garden State, not just the Pinelands. I like to talk about the difference between watches, warnings, and advisories. It's super critical to everybody here that we understand, what they are, because it does sound confusing. And actually, it's so confusing that the National Weather Service will be getting rid of advisories in 2024 and focusing just on the watches and the warnings. However, we have 3 years until then, so I want to break out this graphic. In short, a winter weather advisory and a winter weather warning both means that conditions for significant weather are imminent. However, an advisory is not as significant as a warning. An advisory means it's pretty much a nuisance or a hazard to you. A warning means that it is life-threatening or dangerous to property. A winter storm watch is saying, hey, in the next couple of days, we're going to see some kind of either advisory or warning criteria. And we want to let you know about it ahead of time here. So, oftentimes a common misnomer is that a winter storm watch to a warning is an upgrade. It's not. It's really just a change from one product to another. Going from an advisory to a warning is an upgrade. Going from a warning to an advisory is a downgrade. Well, one thing I'll say too, winter storm watches may not always be issued ahead of an event, especially if we know it's going to be a light event ahead of time. A winter, to give an example, let's say we were going to, and we knew we were going to get 2 inches of snow on Monday. Well, on Saturday, they're not going to put out a winter storm watch saying, hey, watch out for Monday. It's going to be, life-threatening and dangerous, because as long as we're confident that it's going to be like that, we'll issue a winter weather advisory a few hours before it happens to let you know what's going on. Here's a look at the criteria for a snow advisory and a snow warning within a 12-hour time span. Pine Barrens are pretty much all in the same area. Here, you see those dark blues on the left. 2 inches takes an advisory for us here, and 5 inches takes a snow warning within a 12-hour time period. You can see how it changes as you go from north to south. 2 inches in Maine is just another day for them in Maine. Of course, 2 inches in South Carolina, that's a little more significant for them. And, you even get into, if you look here, winter storm warning criteria at 2 inches when you get into South Carolina and parts of Georgia. This is a 24-hour criteria for a snow warning. We would need 7 inches of snow for a snow warning. And then for an ice storm, a 1/4 of an inch of ice. Now, we don't issue ice storm warning more. They're rolled into winter storm warnings, but the point still stands. If you get a 1/4 inch of ice in the forecast, you will see a winter storm warning for significant ice. A winter weather advisory for freezing rain would just take a trace of ice. So really an unmeasurable, amount of ice. Anytime there's freezing rain, you will probably see some kind of winter weather advisory here. 'Tis the season for the last frosts and freezes. The National Weather Service does have a frost and freeze program for us, very helpful. On April 11th is when they can start issuing frost advisories or freeze advisories, frost advisories or freeze watches and warnings for the area. That's for all of New Jersey. I know that southern tip of Cape May County is not shaded. I think that was just a miscalculation on Microsoft Heat. But for us here, April 11th is when they can start issuing them if temperatures get below that point. Just to give you a little bit of climatology on that, we're going to compare Atlantic City International Airport in Hammonton here. It's quite interesting because you would think, and I actually had to talk to Jim Eberwine, good friend of mine, another one of my meteorological fathers. Him and Dave Robinson are my weather parents. we were actually talking about this a couple of days ago. Jim Everwine, I know, was on this program a couple of weeks ago, but we were talking about this a couple of days ago, trying to surmise why the airport, even though it's closer to the shore, has the earliest final freeze, but also the latest final freeze when you compare Hammonton. I think part of it has to do with, if you think about the airport, if you've been to the airport, it is very dense with forest around it. There's not a lot of up. The sensor is really right, in the middle of a field. That probably has something to do with it. Hammonton, of course, is a town. There's a lot of farmland, but there's not a lot of pine barrens right around it. So that might have something to do with it. But in short, you're really not going to see a freeze, your last freeze happen before the mid to late part of March. That's just what climate has showed us so far. And the latest final freeze is usually can happen as late as Memorial weekend. So if you want it to be super, super safe, wait until Memorial Day weekend to start planting, depending on what it is, of course. But by and large, usually once you get into the middle part of April, we're doing okay. And of course, too, this is for 32. We have the hard freezes, when you get below 28. That, of course, is going to happen earlier in the year. You're not going to see a 27 or a 28 in late May. It's just not going to happen. And really, it's not going to happen in our climate changing world. So with that being said, I appreciate everybody listening here this morning. I hope you found it valuable. I hope you learned something here about the Pine Barrens and the weather and the climate that we have here, and also a little bit of handy information at the end about winter weather advisories, watches in the mornings. I'm not forecasting any snow for us here. It's just some good information for us to know as we go into next winter. But of course, we have a lovely spring, a lovely summer, and a very nice fall to come on the way before we get there. So I want to thank Joel again for the time. Thank you so much, Joel, for thinking of me again. And hey, who knows, maybe next year, if we can all do this safely, we can all be together in person. If we're going to go ahead with that. But thank you so much for the time. I do appreciate it. And thanks for listening here today.
Okay, Joe, that was really good. Really neat to get kind of the breakdown, like the backside, the inside information on how you make the forecast, and with the snow warnings and all those things that are involved with the Pinelands. If you want, I have a slide with the phone number. I can show my screen, and then folks can call in and ask us any questions live.
Yeah, absolutely. You want me to stop the share?
Yeah, stop the share and I'll start mine, and then we'll be able to take some questions from the public. So
great.
Hang on one second. Okay. Here we go.
And we can talk about anything you want. We can talk about the Pinelands. We can talk about just weather in New Jersey, climate questions. If you want to talk about my life, I don't know if it's as interesting as the Pinelands, but we can talk about that too. More than happy to take any questions you have about weather, climate, or anything about media here in New Jersey. More than happy to answer them.
Okay. Excellent. The number's up, folks. If you want to call, it's 1-929-205-6099. And it will ask for the meeting ID, which is also there. Sometimes you can also just hit the pound button and you don't have to put in the meeting ID. But that's the phone number, 929-205-6099. So if you have any questions, please feel free to call at this time. Yeah, I'm kind of like you. I grew up always kind of fascinated with the weather and learning about storms. And I went into history and ecology, but if I didn't, I probably could have had a major in weather and maybe would have had a whole different career than I ended up with today.
Hey, it's not too late, Joel.
That's true. And we got a call.
Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah.
Hello, you're live on the air with your question.
Hi, Joel. It's Mark Lobauer. How are you? Joe Martucci, thank you so much for doing this program this morning. I really found it very enlightening. I do have a question for you. I was fascinated by your point about how some of the effects of climate change can be beneficial. And you pointed out blueberry farmers are seeing some helpful change in winter weather that's good for them. I wonder if you have any data that you could point to tell us what you project the climate change impacts may be for the health of our forests in the Pinelands. Can we expect benefit or detriment?
Well, yeah, and thank you so much for the question. The question again was, what else can we expect for the Pine Barrens in a climate changing world? By reporting that I've done over the past couple of months and really years, the one thing that stands out to me, in addition to what I said, is actually a negative, and that's what the southern pine bee. It's an invasive species to our area, to the Pinelands, and they thrive when we don't get those very cold nights, when we don't get those below zero, when we don't get those nights even in the single digits. Bernie Isaacson, tremendously smart guy, whiz kid, loves forestry with the New Jersey DP, says that's his biggest concern. And especially, and he told me this, I think in September, he said, if we don't get a very cold winter, or at least a winter that's average cold, they're really going to be out this year. And, our temperatures were above average this year. We did not get that very significant cold. So I would expect that to be a big increase and a threat to us in the future because they're an invasive species to our area and something that is not good for the health of our trees here in the Pineland. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. Other thing I can mention as well, and this is really for the areas that are closer to the shore, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier, is the invasion of salt water into what was normally fresh areas. Obviously, things aren't growing in salt water. Trees aren't growing in salt water. So, I would say over the span of decades to centuries, unless we're mitigating this, you'll probably see a little bit of a loss in the Pinelands in a town like Morris River, in a town like Eagleswood, let's say, as a result. So, there's pluses and minuses to everything, but those are, I gave you one positive, gave you two negative. But those are what stands out to me.
Well, thanks so much, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks for being on today. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Mark, for calling in. Yeah, that's one of the things. There might be some winners, there might be some losers. With that longer growing season, there could definitely be some potential benefits, but it could also lead to maybe more invasive species would have a better chance to get a foothold. So it's one of those things we're going to have to see how it plays out. But I definitely think that, there would be winners and losers, like Joe said with the pine beetle, we want probably 10 days or so below 10 degrees, and that might really knock down the beetle. Without that, as we saw a few years ago, they come back in pretty robust numbers and will start to, hurt the pine, but that might be better for the oak. So, it'd be interesting.
Yeah, Joe, you would know more about it than I would. This is just what I'm relaying the information from. But, we have not seen 10 nights a year below 10 degrees in the past 2 winters. And I just know over time from looking at data, the trend has been towards not having those kind of winters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the scary thing is there's nothing that we can see right now that's going to tell us that it's going to all of a sudden start to get colder. Everything looks like it's pointing that the winters are going to be generally warmer and wetter. So there is definitely some concerns there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Joe, what have you got? I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
What has been seen in the Pinelands, with some salt water invading these usual freshwater areas? Has there been anywhere in particular where this has been impacted, or are we still, are we relatively okay at this point? Where have we been with that?
With the salt water, what we've seen in, a lot of those kind of, areas, coastal areas, like kind of some of those more maritime forests where there's populations of white cedar, closer to the shore in the meadows. And with events like Sandy and even, some of the smaller types of storms, we definitely saw where that tidal, extra flooding comes in, that storm surge comes in, and then areas that don't typically have the salt water, maybe our habitat for white cedar, get that influx of salt water. And now there's a number, particularly I would say like around the Mullica River, areas where there's like ghost, they call them like ghost swamps, because basically the salt water was enough to eventually kill the cedar trees. And so now we've got these kind of ghost swamps where, because of that saltwater intrusion, one thing we haven't seen too much, but it's something that people think about and is definitely something to plan for, is saltwater intrusion to the aquifer. So if seawater rise gets too high, eventually that could start to kind of blend in to some extent to some of the water in the Cook-Cocansee aquifer, and that is something that would affect drinking water quality, and something that we'll have to stay pretty close onto as time goes on. That might be more in Cape May as opposed to up in the portions of Cape May that are in the Pinelands, but more southern in the tip. But still, that is certainly a concern.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the neat things about the Pinelands National Reserve. It also encompasses places like Island Beach State Park. So in some places, the reserve itself does encompass some pretty substantial coastal habitats. A lot of the portions of the Foresight Refuge are all included in the Pinelands National Reserve as well. And
sure. And I love Foresight. I love walking around there. I haven't done it in about a year, but it's, you can, the views are great. A lot of people around walking. If you got a nice sunny day, it's the day to be out there.
Yeah, and particularly that wildlife drive, you have the opportunity to take a couple hours, and I think it's an 8-mile run, and it usually takes a few hours. But man, it's beautiful, and you never know what you're going to see. All kinds of migratory birds and ducks and raptors, and it's just a very pleasurable experience out there.
Very cool.
All right, Joe. Well, I want to thank you for your time and your presentation. Really good, valuable information to keep in mind, and to always think about when I always kind of look up and see the clouds and get an idea of what the day is going to be, particularly before I head out too far into the wilds, just because I want to be prepared. So thank you very much, and look forward to working with you down the road.
Yeah, absolutely, Joel. Thanks so much, and thanks to everybody again for tuning in here, and enjoy this great day that we have. April showers bring May flowers. We haven't seen many April showers yet so far this month, but I will say as we go into the weekend, going to be a little more unsettled. So, definitely get your outdoor time in today and tomorrow. That would be my advice to you.
All right. It sounds good. On that note, everybody have a great week. Next week's program is going to be by Ken Abel, and he's going to talk about the floor of the Mullica River Valley. So it's going to talk about like the bottom of where the Mullica River interacts with Great Bay and heads out down to Little Leg Inlet. So it'll be really neat to see, what's beneath the surface. And that's what Ken's going to talk about. And that'll be next week's program. So on that, Everybody have a good week and enjoy the good weather while we have it. And don't get caught in the bad weather.